Hello everyone, this is Blair Space here, and this is going to be the updated Kaiju Universe tier list. I'm gonna try to make sure I don't go over an hour with this one, but it probably will, so that's just the heads up, because they obviously added new Kaiju, and there's just things to mention and all that, so just get that out of the way. Also like to make note that this is going to be the last video for a while, because I'm going to be going on a vacation for like nearly 2 weeks, so just a heads up. Okay? Okay. So I'm going to get the worst and the best out of the way because they technically did not change. You will notice that the Do Not Use tier and S Plus tier, however, are gone. But first, I'm going to get this Destroya is technically still the best, but here's the deal, right? If you were to compare Destroya from this version of the list to the last video, it is pathetic. It's really pathetic because it got hit with multiple nerfs. First of all, they reduced his regen by 25%. There was also the reverse fly nerf, which is going to be the reasoning for a lot of kaijus to be lower on this list than they were last time. Then there was the fact that the hit registration revamp update, which was like a while ago, a couple weeks ago, screwed over his hitboxes, primarily variable slicer to a just bad degree, and Tail Whip for some reason was given a nerf of 10 damage for some reason. I don't know. He's still the best kaiju, but if you compare it to him a while ago, load of crap. Okay, next up is Manila. Still the worst, but he got a health buff. He basically was given 700 health. He has, basically 2,500 health now, which compared to 1,700 health, that's a pretty big buff. However, I explained why he was in the Do Not Use tier in the last video, and those reasons are why he's in D tier. What is nice, however, is that he's the only kaiju in D tier, and honestly, considering that he's a meme Game Pass, it's kind of befitting. But listen, to those who know his real rank, let's just keep it a secret, okay? We don't want anyone knowing. Okay. Next up is Kamata-kun. He also got a buff. He got a health buff. He now has the same amount of health as Gojira, 2,220. That's about it. He's now no longer in the bottom of D tier, so, that's pretty good. Zombie Gigan, nothing changed with him. The only reason he's better than Kamata-kun is because he has a beam. He has poor melee DPS. Infection is unreliable. And I understand it's good for helping your friends, but bear in mind, low health kaiju would then get a speed nerf. So it's kind of iffy. And this is on your own. On his own, he does not do very well. So, yeah. Next up is Anguirus, actually, which got a remodel. Basically, they buffed his speed to 40, her sprint speed. But what they did with his melees is they increased the cooldown slightly, and his hitboxes for melees are much smaller. I did a test with Nerdiest Mementos, and with, I would say, a max health and max damage Anguirus would probably either just barely win against the Gojira or just barely lose. Speaking of, Gojira is next. Oh, not there. Gojira, nothing changed. He's pretty consistent. Low health, low speed on land, pretty meh beam, okay melee. Next is Shin Form 3. The reason he's above the others is he can spam his blood vomit, and he actually got a speed buff. He went from 24 sprint to 28 sprint, so now he can keep his distance a bit easier, Next up is Mother Longlegs, got a buff to her hitboxes, which means that her melee DPS is more reliable. She's really, although a glass cannon, she's really good at rushing down opponents now. Much better than before. So, And next is Godzilla Jr. As far as I'm aware, nothing changed about him. That's just where he is. Next up is Wendigo Crawler and Skullcrawler, who are tied now, instead of Skull being better than Wendigo, because Wendigo got his hitboxes buffed to be the same as Skull, and now he has a super jump. He even has his own roars now, which is irrelevant to this, but it's nice. Now, this one, I'm going to have to explain this one. Basically, they buffed Gazor where he does double damage in water. So, and to give an idea, he's the fastest swimming kaiju. In terms of raw speed, he's the fastest in the water. So, give you an idea, max speed Gazor, 175 swim speed. Combine that with double damage in water. Gazor is basically a god in the water, but a peasant on land. So it kind of balances him out into C tier. King is C tier. So I'd say that's a pretty nice spot for him, considering he was the second worst kaiju in the game before. Next up is Mothra Larva, which in my opinion is like the opposite of Gazora. Her speed is godly on land for a ground kaiju. Base sprint speed or roll speed of 80. She also has pretty spammable melee attack around Shinform 2's strength in terms of melee. She has decent hitboxes, but she has very low health. Oh, she also has a decent web attack or a beam attacks essentially. But her swim speed is awful for a ground kaiju. It's 50, which means flyers can keep up with her in the water, which is pretty bad. And flyers can keep up with her on the ground. You get the idea. But considering how amazing she is on land, she's bottom of B tier, which I would say is not a bad spot. Next is Kamadov-kun. Nothing really changed, but the reason nothing changed. But the reason I'm putting him here, lower than last time, is because I realized something. Slow speed and low health is such a bad combination. And granted, you could argue he's a flyer, which is why he's, not down here, but for a flyer, he's slow, if that makes sense. Like, 80 flight speed is pretty slow for a flyer. That means he only outspeeds Destroya and Showa Godzilla in terms of flying. Which, combined with 1700 health, is pretty bad. He has good DPS, though. He can also swim, so he's not terrible by any means. It really goes to show how broken flying is in this game. Like, if your kaiju can fly, that's an automatic bump up in the list. Next is Female Muto. Nothing changed. Weak against flyers and beams. Pretty strong in melee, though. So, Next is Kamibus. He actually used to be in low A when he had the 50% damage buff in the water, but he got that removed, and now he's in low B. Not a bad spot, but not a great one either. Essentially, he's really good at surviving. If you can play him correctly, you can be really tough to kill, especially if you're Tortoise Fortress. That is a really good healing move. If you use it at the correct time, you can be really hard to kill. It's just that his melee DPS is pretty meh, and his actual raw health is not that too high either, 2900, but he's really fast on the water. Second fastest swimmer in the game, 125 swim speed. So, that's pretty good. Next up is Showa Godzilla. He got a health buff, but that didn't change anything in my opinion. Because here's the thing, he can technically do all three. He can fly, fight on ground, and swim. But the issue is, he is so terrible when flying, and he's so terrible when swimming. So, he's an okay ground fighter, but because his flight takes up his sprint slot, he can't really fight well on the ground. So that's kind of what... Yeah. He's good. He can do everything, but you basically have to use flight and swim as a means of getting around, not for actual combat. Granted, I will say, credit to where it's due, there are Showa-mans I know of who are very, very good at this kaiju and can land things like dropkick and even dorsal plate charge in the air. If you can do that, you can do some pretty big things with Showa. So, I will... I'm going to give credit where it's due with that. Come on, where is he? I'm blind right now. I was blind. Okay. Next is Male Muto. Nothing really... Actually, no. The Reverse Fly nerf. I will say, the Reverse Fly nerf, as a side note, did not affect Kamadov-kun that much, but honestly, I don't think it affected Male Muto that much either. Male Muto is essentially... He can fly, and he can swim, he just can't sprint. But he has decent health, and his strike attack hits twice. So it burns through charge, but it can do some nasty damage. Okay, next is what I would argue is just Kamadov-kun but better because it's a glass cannon. Mega Gears is a glass cannon, only at 2,000 health, but that's still more than Kamadov-kun. But her melee hitboxes are pretty meh. Her charge costs are pretty eh. But her beam does high damage, but has a long wind-up time, so if someone beams you when you're charging up your beam, you either have to just back out or just take a lot of damage. But her speed is godly. She's technically the fastest kaiju overall in the game with 130 base flight speed. So basically a glass cannon, but not slow. Kind of like Kamadov-kun. Literally just a better Kamadov-kun. Titanus Mojira. Brought down to like mid B tier due to the fact that the reverse flight nerf. If you want to see, I was gonna say this for any kaiju I don't go into too much detail about or explain their rank is changed because of the reverse flight patch. Just go to my previous video and then go to reference if you want a full detailed description because I'm trying to make sure this doesn't drag on for too long, if that makes sense. But for more Titanus Mojir, God Rays, good DPS, decent health, decent speed, but her melee hitboxes are bad. I might just explain everything anyway, honestly, because it bothers me if I don't. Go there. It's gonna make me look like a fool, huh? There we go. Kumanga went up a little bit because flyers were the bane of his existence. So because it was mostly lightweight kaiju, but because a lot of flyers were moved down in viability overall because of the reverse fly nerf, his viability went up, if that makes sense. He's not the only ground kaiju who's going to be benefiting from that either. Next is Heisei Mothra, reverse fly nerf. That's why she's lower than before. Turkey Rodan had two big nerfs. First of all, they doubled his size, so he's much easier to hit now. And the charge cost of his beam went from 10 to 60. I would say he wasn't really affected all that much by the reverse fly nerf, though, honestly. Next up is, I know it's surprising considering that I ranked him in middle of C last time, but hear me out, okay? Because in that time I maxed him, I discovered two things. One, he's good at ranging kaiju that are slow, small, and have like meh hitboxes. That are just, basically if you're slower than him and have a meh hitbox, he can range you because he's thin, he's long, but he's thin. So if you can use control lock and sprint, you can basically keep your side facing your opponent so that way they can't hit you, but you can quickly swing into them once you bait out their moves or just wait for them to use their attacks and then hit them. So he can do that, but more importantly, because the main point of his collision hitbox is in the center of his body where his camera is, you can technically stick your head into the wall, into like walls and terrain, and this allows you to beam through terrain. So any beach, any hill, any mountain, even buildings themselves, you can, if you stick your head through them and you aim at your target, as long as there's no other terrain blocking your view, you can beam them through that. It's extremely busted when you consider the fact that, consider this, okay? Let's say I am about to have a beam contest with a Heisei, right? I beam him through the terrain. He beams back with like his red spiral ray, but because I'm hiding behind terrain and shooting him through it, he can't damage me, but I can still damage him, and I basically made him waste his beam. So to give you an idea, like, it's freaking nuts. Okay, next up, Jet Jaguar, nothing changed. Because I'm pretty sure I didn't put him in the bottom of A tier, it's just that other kaiju that were below him were just simply moved up or moved down, so he's still good. He's as good as he was before. Pretty solid. Okay, next up is Batra. Reverse fly nerf is basically the reason he was moved down a little bit. Still very good kaiju, very good hitboxes, pretty good speed, good melee DPS, okay health. His beam is crap though, that's about it. Okay, next is Titanus Gojira, who went up slightly, mostly due to the reverse fly nerf. Like, I believe he was like bottom of B or A tier. Because of the reverse fly nerf, he went up slightly because of that. Not too much, but it was enough. Now this Kaiju, although nothing happened to her, I just overestimated her. And the main reason is I realized just how weak her melees are. Biolante's melees do 545 and 635. Now, technically that's not too bad, but when you compare it to other kaiju as big as her, or have the same health pool as her, it can be the bane of her existence. And it's like 3 sec. It's not like a extraordinarily fast cooldown either. It's like every 3 seconds for both their cooldowns. So yeah. Next up are these two. They are not tied. I would like to first point out 2 things. First of all, I believe I underestimated them. First of all, so I believe that they deserve to be up here anyways. I will say Heisei Rodan is probably slightly better than Titanus overall. Titanus has more DPS and a very small health advantage, but Heisei Rodan is smaller, harder to hit, and has better hitboxes. But here's the main deal with these two. Outside of me underestimating them, these two are not affected at all by the reverse fly nerf. And a lot of the kaiju that gave them trouble beforehand were nerfed by the reverse fly nerf, like kaiju that could compete with them. So there were flyers that benefited from the reverse fly nerf. So overall, these two are big winners here. Next is Skila, or what? I don't know how to pronounce it. I probably pronounced it wrong, but basically, she is a melee DPS god. Just don't fight this thing in melee combat, please, for the love of God. She's like a female Muto, but better. Her hitboxes are busted, her melee is busted. You can't even range her as a flyer. You have to use beams or flyer with a beam. Listen, I understand it's annoying, but it's literally the option to do against her. The only downside she has against female Muto is like less than just maybe like 60 less health. That's it. So yeah. Next up is, where are they? Okay. Final Wars and Frostbite. These two went up because a lot of lightweight flyers that got nerfed, because their viability went down, their viability went up. Because consider this. Consider how oppressive flyers can be, right? If you consider that, imagine if all flyers got nerfed, and then kaiju who were negatively affected by them, suddenly they're looking a lot better now, don't you think? Now, Final Wars, basically, he's good at everything, but he's not amazing at everything. He has pretty decent melee. He has above average swim speed for like the large Gojiras. He also has pretty good beams. But like I said, good at everything, but not great at everything. Now, Frostbite is like Titanus Gojira, but more health, a slightly better beam, and has a much better claw hitbox. And you're slightly slower, but apart from that, he's really good. Next up is Heisei Gojira. Last time I believe he was at the bottom of S tier, but basically he got a very small melee nerf. He went from 710 melee damage to like 680, which that does add up over time, just to let you know. So, yeah, it was enough of a change to put him from bottom of S to top of A tier. Speaking of bottom of S, 2014, or Chad Gojira, got a hitbox. His claw hitbox was buffed. It's now the same as his bite, which means that it reaches his entire model, including his tail, including the top of his head. This basically means it's really hard to range him. He can also spam his atomic breath if you have enough charge, like 5 charge. His melee DPS, despite his raw numbers being lower than like Titanus, his cooldowns are quicker, which means that, you could actually beat him in a Titanus in a melee fight. You could either range him, and if he gets in your face, you could technically out DPS him. The only downsides he has compared to like Titanus, for example, is a little bit less health and a little bit less land speed. Apart from that, he's really amazing. Another kaiju that I overestimated last time, I think, is Volcanic Violence, and I'm saying this because Searing Spears, although it does insane damage, the hitbox just seems iffy to me. Like, it's just, Searing Spears has such an iffy hitbox. It's not bad, I would say, but it's just iffy. And I mentioned this in the last tier list, but I think I underestimated just how bad an iffy hitbox can be. So that's why. Next is I know a lot of people are going to be happy about this one, but Thermo Godzilla, finally in S tier, welcome. The reason he's an S tier is pretty simple. A lot of flyers got, hit with the reverse fly nerf, and because that flyers were Thermo's biggest weakness, this definitely helped him. He is now definitely an S tier. Next is Mogira, a flyer that was not affected by the reverse fly nerf because it didn't really rely on melee or reverse fly out too much. It relies on its beams and its sniping potential. It's just like a sniper class flyer, So yeah. Next is Gigan. Honestly, I don't think it was really affected by the reverse fly nerf all too much. One of the very few lightweight kaiju that was not. It's basically, I would say it's a hybrid between sniper class and melee rushdown class in terms of flyers. Like he has strong beams, and he also has really good melee. He's small and he's hard to hit, and yeah, I'd say he's really good. He is a really good kaiju. Next is Mogira but cancerous Mechagodzilla 2. Very strong beams, a force field that just says, screw you, you're not going to beam me, which has a short cooldown, like a really short cooldown. He's small and hard to hit with melee attacks. Literally Mogira, but slightly better overall. And he also has pretty decent health, 3,600 health. Like, he's hard to level up because he's beam reliant, but oh my god, he is just, Like, if I were to make a tier list based off how annoying kaiju are, he would be S+. I'm not lying. He's infuriating to fight. Thankfully, however, he has a good counter, which I'll get to. Well, it'll come up after this, but Monster Zero honestly was not affected by the reverse fly nerf because he can just brute force through stuff. He can still range stuff. He's amazing. Monster Zero he's also he's extremely flexible in what build you can do. He could have max I'm going to assume every build I mention is going to have max damage, okay? With this, you can have max regen, 5 health and 5 regen, 5 speed, 5 regen, max speed. He has so many options for different situations. Next up is Mecha King Ghidorah and King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah, nothing changed. The only thing I forgot to mention in the last video is for some reason he has a swim speed of 70. I don't know why, but it's a very weird advantage. Now, the reason Mecha King Ghidorah is tied with him now is because he got buffed since last time. First of all, they made his force field bigger, so now it can actually safely cover his body now. And second of all, they made it cheaper in charge, but most importantly, the cooldown on it is so quick that you can spam it. Like, think of it like this. You use force field, and by the time your force field ends, you can use it again. Which not only means that beam damage against him is almost irrelevant, he basically is the ultimate counter against Mechagodzilla. It's amazing. I love using this thing against mecha players who think they're, excuse my language, hot shit, and then just crap on them. It's amazing. Mecha King Ghidorah, though he lacks, like, raw power against King Ghidorah, the force field is amazing. I don't think I need this anymore. Now, Shin Gojira, technically, overall in the tier list, did not move, but he is stronger than last time. He essentially is he's like a tank/sniping class ground kaiju hybrid. Back beams is amazing against flyers now. It's actually spectacular, especially after reverse fly nerf. Top this off, he can now chain combo his beam. Like, he can actually spam his beams now, and it does insane damage. Now, he also can use his back beams to hit people from the water. He has insane regen. Health is still insane. And as far as I'm aware, the only thing he sucks at is, like, really close combat. Like, really close combat. That's where he's lacking. Especially against, like, small kaiju with strong melee, like Junior, Skullcrawler. Like, they get on your ankles. It's pretty rough. But apart from that, Shin is spectacular. And another kaiju that technically got buffed is Burning Godzilla, simply due to the fact that they buffed his meltdown. So the previous version on the last list, to give an example, was it gave you a 65% damage buff, but you had to use that at like 35 health or something like that, or less, which is really bad. But his current version of his meltdown, what it does is you activate at 65% of your health and you get a 30% damage buff. The damage buff is less, but because you have to use it as a higher health value, you can use it longer and you can overall just do a lot more damage with it before you die. So yeah. And that's the tier list. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to do this for so long, but the reason I kept putting it off was because we've been getting kaiju so quick lately, but I decided to heck with it, because I'm going to be going on vacation soon, and I really wanted to do this, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. So and if you watched this entire thing, thank you. Like, that means a lot to me. I'm glad that you were willing to spend over half an hour of me just talking about, like, kaijus from a Roblox game and how viable they are. Like, that means a lot to me that you're willing to spend that much time with me on such a trivial thing. So thank you.